Hey guys, welcome to our chat today. We have two incredible gentlemen, Stuart Jones and Byron Rose from Rose & Jones Buyers Agents. My name's Damien Cooley and we're here to talk all things about rising prices in the Sydney property market, along with what's driving the lack of property supply right now. Stu, Byron, welcome to this afternoon.
Thanks, Damien. Nice to be here.
Thanks, Damien.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I think one of the biggest questions on everyone's mind right now is what is really driving prices in Sydney? I mean, we're seeing unbelievable results, whether it be buying property, negotiating, auctions, online auctions. There is no doubt that one, there's not much on the market, and two, prices are running very quickly. Stu, what's your opinion? And you may have a number of them, but what's your core opinions on really what's driving this incredible price rise?
Thanks, Damien. Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of key issues that are driving in the market. COVID plays its role, but it's not the key role, and I think it's being used as an excuse for the supply issues that we've currently got. For the last 10 years, we've noticed that supply year on year has been running down, and particularly in the last 5 years, it's accelerated. Largely, it's driven, in my opinion, from being in the market for as long as we've been, is that empty nesters, or the baby boomers that are currently the empty nester market now, are healthier and living longer than they've ever lived. They're wealthier than they've ever been. They're also the fastest growing population in the country, and these guys don't have anywhere to go that meets their lifestyle requirements, their ties to the community, where their children are, where their grandchildren are, and where their friends are. And as a result of living longer, they're staying in their homes longer. An example of this is in Coogee, where properties until recently used to transact every 8 years, they're transacting every 18. And I think it's fair to say that scarcity drives value. So something that is rarer or lesser of has more value applied to it, like a Fabergé egg, for example. Well, houses for families are like Fabergé eggs at the moment. So when they do come on the market with low interest rates, people are just to secure 20 years. Two of the big problems that we've got in getting empty nesters to move is, A, they don't have anywhere to go to that suits themselves. So, 3-bedroom apartments, for example, with lifts from the garage, views, and or outlook, entertaining, the things that they would like to transport in a more compact version from their family home into their empty nest is one of the drivers. So planning is not forward-looking enough to how to get people out of their homes to provide more supply to the market, therefore making those homes more affordable, and that trickling down the supply chain of the first home buyer into an apartment. And the other big one is transaction costs. A $3 million home is, costing you $150, $180 in stamp duty. If you want to buy a $3 million apartment after you've sold a $5, $6 million home, which is not uncommon in Sydney now, your transaction costs are high, and that erodes your disposable income in retirement, where you're more preservationary than you are, risky. So you want to hang on to your money. You're thinking about those things when you make a move. If you can't find anything suitable to go to, and you can't justify the stamp duty cost, you stay where you are. That's one less house on the market. If 200 people do that in Coogee, and there's 200 family homes in Coogee which aren't being made available to families who want to step up to those for their next 20 years. So I actually think it's a supply issue rather than a COVID issue, and I think that this is going to persist. And of course, it's supported by lower interest rates as well. So it's cheaper to own a home now, so you can afford to pay more to get what you want than it might have been 10 years ago. So I think they're the two key drivers. Supply is driven by lack of empty nesting opportunities, A, and B, transaction costs are high.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Stu. And in addition to that, what we're actually saying at Coalface in Rose & Jones is we're experiencing a number of clients who have actually traded thinking, I've received a very good offer on my property, I'm trading out, and they are downsizers, and still going to what Stuart was just outlining, there is nothing that is matched up to expectations on the sell side and the quantum that they've received, they would like to redeploy a portion of that and preserve some of it, but there is nothing there that is suitable for a number of our clients to move into. So the lack of relaxation around planning controls at the state government level, whilst they continue to talk about meeting the demands or the future demands of occupancy in this state, then filters down to a local council level where there are constant risks in place in front of the developers, not just the roadblocks from a planning point of view, but there are also cost imposts on them as well, which make development even more expensive for them to carry that asset through to development stage.
Yeah, so I guess the thing is, in all of these areas, particularly along the east coast of Australia, and let's just talk about the eastern suburbs for a moment, the reality is, I mean, they're not making any more land. I think we've all got that dream of wanting to be in the family home and have a big backyard and have a pool or entertaining area, room for the kids to run around, or just room to move, be close to the water. That buyer realises that they need to continually be stepping up in price of what they're going to have to spend to live that dream and have that home. And I think that, like what Stu was saying before about the transactional cost, there's a lot of people who own that home right now that they're not using all 4 or 5 bedrooms. They're only using 1 or 2 of those bedrooms. They don't need the big house. They probably don't really want to be in it. They probably don't want to leave the family home, but they know that they don't need the family home anymore. But in order for them to downsize and go and buy something, like they probably bought that home for, say, $500,000 or $1 million, many, many, many years ago. And for them to now go and buy a $2 million apartment, they're going to have to fork out $100,000 in stamp duty. And to them, that's a lot of money to be wiped off their asset base of what they have, that 1, they want to live off, and 2, they want to leave something for their kids at the right time. So stamp duty plays a big role. Transactional costs, buying and selling, plays a big role. But like we say, they're not making any more of that land. So do we need to change the way that we think about the style of homes that we live in, or is this really just the new norm in terms of pricing?
No, I think we do, Damien. I think we've spoken about this off air, that in more established developed cities, and if you look at London and Berlin and New York and Milan, for example, when you look at the data in 1994, 30% of the rent, 30% of the residents in those markets were renters, and in Australia only 18% were. Now Sydney and Melbourne are in the top 10 cities in the world to live in, and what you're seeing is the rental market lift to from 14-18% up to 30-33% of the market. What's interesting about that is that all those developed markets have a lot more apartment style living. People are accustomed to living in larger apartments, 3 and 4 bedroom apartments, raising their families, and they have summer houses. So if you translated that to here, more and more people probably are looking to consider having 3 or 4 bedroom apartments to live in for the families, having a house, down at Berry or up at the Central Coast at Kincumber, or a place down in the Southern Highlands where they've got a getaway. And that's not as fanciful as it looks, because what we're seeing now is, and you sell properties that have got a higher value, that are 3 and 4 bedroom apartments, Damien, to young families that would traditionally be, empty nester apartments. So families are starting to move into apartments as a way to live, because what's become accentuated because of COVID over the last 2 years, lifestyle. And so people really want to have that lifestyle, so $20 million is paid for a 4-bedroom apartment at South Bondi to have access to the beach and the lifestyle amenity down there. And I think what planning's missing is you don't, across the board, I think that we need to look at providing more 3 and 4 bedroom apartments, not just for the high net worth and the affluent, but also for middle Australia who no longer need the backyard, but would rather have an apartment that's lock and leave. They've got access to parks and amenity, but developers are being forced to build 2-bedroom apartments. We've got an oversupply of those, but we've got a chronic undersupply of 3-bed and 4-bedroom apartments to accommodate empty nesters who want to be able to have their grandchildren live with them, to accommodate young families who want to go into a townhouse, a duplex, you know, a semi or a freestanding home. And quite frankly, they, in my opinion, are looking to the estimated growth population in Australia. I mean, by 2050, they're anticipating sort of 50 million people living in Australia. We've got a population of 26 million now, and we have our cities, which are primarily Sydney and Melbourne, which don't have the capacity to accommodate those types of numbers. And so the problem around property values is going to persist. You know, they're going to go up for family homes, and there's going to be fewer and fewer people who can afford to own those. And there's potentially a greater dislocation in the market than we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
You know, 2-bedroom apartments haven't grown at the same rate of houses. If you look at 3- and 4-bedroom apartments, they're growing at the same rate of houses. And I think it's an interesting phenomena which planning aren't looking at. And, you know, we've looked at, you know, over 50, 60, 70,000 houses over the last 22 years, properties. We know how people are buying, but I don't think planning is sympathetic to what the future requirements of a growing population are and the way that they're looking at living and the way that that's changing over time. And it's becoming more European, increasingly, than it's traditionally been the quarter-acre block with 3 bedrooms and a red brick home.
So surely there's more of those people who, Stu, are living in, who own that 2-bedroom semi, or they own a small property on a small parcel of land. Those people are starting to think, okay, if I'm going to sell, I've got transactional costs. If I'm then going to buy, I've got transactional costs, stamp duty. I've got to market my property for sale. I pay agents' fees on the way through. If I have a buyer's agent help me source something, like there are significant transactional costs to get in and out of real estate. Those people are sitting there thinking, let's just see if we can get a DA on our property. Let's try and add 2 bedrooms. Let's try and go up and out at the back. Let's forego having the 1,000 square metre parcel of land or the 800 square metre parcel of land. Let's stay on the 250 or 300 and let's see what better use of the space we can have. That way they don't have all those transactional costs and they use that money to put into the renovation of their own home.
Yeah.
Do you see that? I get a sense that the transactional cost, whilst it's an impost and something that Stu and I have spoken about before, is that the catalyst for what we class to be a supply chain issue? Okay, so the supply chain issue doesn't start at the bottom; it starts at the top.
Yeah,
because they're the people who naturally people always are trying to progress their wealth through their property ownership cycle. So the people who are at the top of the tree, they've been there for a long period of time. There's nowhere for them to go, right? But they aren't the ones with the transactional cost concerns. It's the meat in the middle, let's call it between your $2 and $6 million price point, where that person at the 6 has got nowhere to go. The transactional costs may have somewhat an issue or an impost on them to make that decision to move on. And then this roadblock continues from the bottom up. So there's always this belting at the door for the next person to move up the property chain to the next one and the next one and the next one. And they just can't get there because that person then can't get to the next level and vice versa. So
it's a vicious circle.
It's a vicious circle. It goes from top to bottom all the way through, no matter the price point.
Yeah. So I think a really good. Sorry, Damo, I wanted to speak to your to that example of the 2-bedroom semi to expand into a 4-bedroom home. And let's stick at Coogee. You know, you can buy a 2-3 bedroom semi in Coogee for sort of, you know, early to mid 3s. If you were living in that semi and you bought it for 1.8, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, it would now, probably be worth, high twos, because it's still only a two-bedder, but it might have parking. You have aspirations to stay in the area, but to stay in the area, you've got to spend between 5 to 6 mil. To your point around transaction costs, a 5 to 6 mil purchase is going to roughly be a 7% stamp duty cost alone. So on 5 mil, that's about 350K.
Unbelievable.
If you can turn your existing home that you bought for 1.8 into a 4-bedroom home, compromise a backyard because you've got great parks and beach and local amenity nearby, that renovation is probably going to cost you $1 million. So you turn a $1.8 million home into a family home that's desirable. You've done it for say $1 million, maybe less. You've saved yourself $500,000 in transaction costs, because even if you could find a $5 million home that was suitable, you've got to be prepared to part with $500,000, in stamp duty. So I think that is a really good example that you brought up, that people are probably really scared off by the fact that they've got school fees, they've got this dead money that they're putting into stamp duty. Why don't we stay in our home, refinance against that because the market's strong enough to give us a good valuation? We can make this home our 20-year home. And so the $6 million home doesn't want to sell anyway because they've got nowhere to go. The $1.8 million home, who might want to go into the 6, doesn't because he can't justify the stamp duty costs or may not be able to get there, but he can get $1 million to renovate his home. Therefore, the 2-bed apartment buyer who wants to get into that semi can't move either. And so you can see how you get compression through that supply chain.
Yep.
And it really is largely top down rather than bottom up.
So the question is, the hard part about it, government doesn't want to abolish stamp duty. They don't want to reduce stamp duty because they earn too much money from it. And there is something to understand, as hard as it is, to say, well, that money actually does go towards running New South Wales, if we're just talking about state specific. And we have a lot of great things in New South Wales as a result of a government that has money to spend. So there is that part of it. But I guess the real estate part that we want answered is, and I think the answer is yes, I'd love your opinion. If we reduce stamp duty by 50%, do transactions double? So if we reduce stamp duty by half, will twice as many people sell their home? So instead of it being 18 years in Coogee holding onto a home, does it reduce to 9? Or does it reduce to 7? Or do people just start saying, because I mean, I live in a house now, I'm thinking, you know what? It costs so much to get out of that house and get into another one and do this and do that. I'm like, I'm just going to keep it. Whereas if it didn't cost me much to do it, I think it'd be more like, yeah, let's move to Coogee, or let's move to Maroubra. Let's make that move. It's almost like owning the house becomes a bit less important if you are happy just to like move to those different places that you'd like to live. I mean, we're not here for very long, are we? So you've got to have a good quality of life, the best quality of life you can. And change is great.
Yeah.
I think in regards to what you just outlined, that if stamp duty was released, yes, you would more than likely find there would be an uptick in transactions in the marketplace. But the downside of all that, which we as consumers are addicted to as well, is that house ownership or property ownership has created us an exceptional amount of individual or family wealth through property ownership. Now, if you have a lot more turnover, whilst we're talking about supply, how are we seeing property growth, property price growth? That may subdue property price growth, but we've been invested in property, or our wealth has been created so much out of property ownership. Is that something that people would possibly subscribe to?
I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think they would, off the back of being able to get in and out of property a lot easier. And I think that those people who have those big homes would be more inclined to sell them, trade down, pay less stamp duty as off the back of it. The person selling and trading up pays less stamp duty on the trade up. And I think the average time that person holds their family home, I think that time will reduce, because I think people will buy and sell more often. And if transactional costs are less, stamp duty being the biggest contributor to that, I think more people would move around. And if you think about it, if transactions double or triple, then in essence the government's going to be making more money. Yeah, but it's you can get in and out faster.
Yeah, it becomes a volume game. I think I think you're right, Damo, and there's we're spitballing here, and probably smarter people than myself will have better solutions. But I think it's a combination of what you're talking about. I think that it's a well-trodden path that Australians have 70% of their wealth tied up in home ownership because of the CGT-free nature of ownership.
Yep.
It is the largest asset class in Australia. It dwarfs the stock market. So people hope that their property is going to double, triple, quadruple over its ownership time, so that when they get to retire, they've got tax-free money to live off for the balance of their life. We're living longer, so they feel like they need more of it. I think there needs to be incentives around more transacting. But even if we reduce the stamp duty, we've still got a problem of empty nesters don't have anywhere to go.
Yep.
So it's a combination of fast tracking, planning, in our suburbs, in areas that it is still desirable to live in, but are in strategic growth corridors. Perhaps more 3-bedroom apartments, on busier roads, so that landed homes on quieter streets, unaffected by that style of living. I think a lowering in stamp duty, of course, will indubitably increase volumes in transactions, but we need to make sure that we've got enough supply of empty nest properties for people to move into first and foremost. And if the government wasn't even willing to let go of stamp duty, whilst you're active as a PAYG employee or a business owner, certainly when you're retired, there should be tax relief around being around the stamp duty on your next purchase or potentially your last purchase.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that you have more disposable income and you become less of a burden, on the welfare system potentially. So, but
Stu, they're tax-free dollars.
Sorry,
they're after-tax dollars. I meant to say they're after-tax dollars that you're spending on a tax. So you've paid tax on the money, then you know what I mean. And even the biggest rort in commercial property is when you buy a property with vacant possession and you pay GST on the sale, you pay stamp duty on the GST. That's a tax on a tax. It's just the most the biggest of all time.
The ATO or the only institution that tax a tax. Everyone else is illegal and you go to jail.
Yeah.
But
I am
just something. Another one that's been swirling around in my mind for some time, and I think it dovetails quite well into, we've been talking about ownership, home ownership. The other component is the residential investor market. And something which, as I said, has been mulling in my head for years is the residential property apartment investor market has created a really big problem for individuals, young couples who do not feel safe around the roof over their head because of the mum and dad property investors, and they can pull the trigger at a whim to trade that asset. And they'll pull that trigger when they get the knock on the door from the selling agent to say, I've got a buyer who's going to pay you overs. And they go, oh, we'll take that money. There's a CGT impost.
Yep.
One thing I've been thinking about in that space, which I think would have a ripple effect, is if you've got the capacity to make an investment into the residential market, whether it be a house or an investment, that asset must be locked away from a trade for a number of years. And that the individuals occupying that space have tenure, okay? They can't be kicked out. They can't be given notice to move out because the purchaser who's buying that property because the agent's got a knock at the door they can't kick that tenant out and have VP for them to move into. So there's this ripple and a ripple effect in the sense of young couples, even married couples. They can have a 5 by 5 year lease. They've got a determined fixed period of 5 years over their head. If the vendor wants, the landlord wishes to trade, that's great. They can trade, but does not impact the occupant of that property at all.
Yeah, there's a number of points of consideration for that. Obviously, financial status and having to trade rather than wanting to trade. And the way the tenancy laws are right now, you know, you can take a 12-month lease on a property, and after a month you can give notice that you're going to move out, and you know you pay. I think you pay about a month's rent as a penalty. You know, which is good for tenants, but it can be a real challenge for landlords, particularly moving out at different times of the year and when there's more pressure on more supply of rental properties on the market. Landlords who can't afford to hold a property vacant for a long time because they've also got mortgage requirements that they need to uphold. I'm conscious of the fact that we've really only got a few minutes to go to talk. And I just wanted to just get your final thoughts on, you know, what the market is doing, particularly for the rest of 2021. You know, what we think it's going to be doing in the new year. I said before we got on air, you know, I'm hot off the back of an auction of property I just sold in 8 Healy Street, 14 registered bidders, reserved 2,250,000, terrace in Paddington, sells for 3,290,000, like over $1 million over its reserve price. What do you guys think the market's going to be doing? There's obviously lack of supply. Interest rates are obviously low. What are you guys advising buyers right now who are thinking about buying?
I think that because of the things that we spoke about, supply is going to be a persistent issue. Interest rates probably aren't going to go up for a while. So I feel like vendors can be confident about still getting strong prices in markets that are chronically undersupplied. I think unlike any other time, we never crystal ball in our business, we never hotspot in our business, but unlike any other time, because of low interest rates, because of chronic undersupply, we're going to see prices persist through the rest of this year and through next year. The only thing that I can see that's possibly going to impact on rising prices is either a major economic calamity or banks severely changing the way that they lend money. They've tightened a little bit, but if they continue to tighten, that'll impact on prices. But demand is still deep. I mean, if buyers are waiting for spring to produce more stock, it's also going to produce more buyers, which is going to produce more price competition. So if you find a home that you like now, that you could live in or modify, that fits your requirements and lands well within your budget and gives you a chance to add some value to it later, then I'd be buying it now, because what might look expensive today is going to look cheap tomorrow. I think when we look back through the rearview mirror in spring, if you saw something that you like now, you're probably going to wish that you bought it. And I think it's just going to keep going. And until one of two things happen: banks tighten lending, or we have something major economically happen. Something that we've also got to bear in mind is that Australia's being heat mapped. So at the moment, our buying pool is 25 million people. But once the world opens up, maybe in 2 years' time, we're going to have 7 billion people potentially looking at Australia as a safe haven and a great place to live post-pandemic. Because if we go into another one, I'd much rather be in Australia than I probably would want to be in any other part of the world. And so I think people have got to start to understand the difference between price and value. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. So focus less on price, because if it fits your budget, value is actually more important. Does it support the family? Does it support working from home? Does it provide close access to schools? Does it give you the lifestyle amenity that you want so that you can live a good life?
Yep.
Yeah.
And Byron,
Agree with that.
regionally, obviously, you know, Berry, the Southern Highlands, and Yass would be the three hot spots for people wanting to buy.
Of course, mate.
That lifestyle.
Of course.
Property. Now, for the record, we own properties in those areas, so that was a joke.
Disclaimer.
That's the disclaimer. Oh dear, guys.
I think that's going to persist, though. Seriously,
Yeah.
Damo, I think Goulburn, Newcastle, Byron Shire, Southeast Queensland, Bathurst, Orange,
Valley.
you know, even these places are going to, the prices are going to go up disproportionately because you just get so much more bang for your buck. And now that so many more people can work from home, that's going to persist.
Yep.
Yeah.
Guys, been great to
Very
chat
true.
today. I think we've covered off some really
Lovely.
interesting topics. It's been super fun. I really appreciate your time and look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Damo.
Thanks, Damo.